Know the difference with Annex Wealth Management? When Dave Spano says know what you own, it's not just a marketing phrase. To help explain what that means, I'm joined by Trevor Nargis, Supervisor, Trading Team at Annex Wealth Management. Hey, Trevor.
Hey, Danny. Happy to be here.
When we invite people to click that Get Started button at annexwealth.com, it puts a couple of things into motion. The wealth manager establishes contact, talk things over, learn more about the person or the person involved, and then work to gather material the investment team will use for analysis. Trev, what does that team need to begin?
Yeah, it's actually pretty easy. Typically, the most useful information for us is just going to be your recent statements. That'll help give us a lot of the information we need, such as what investments someone might hold and the quantities of various stocks, bonds, ETFs, mutual funds, you name it, that might be held in an account.
When you and the team have that stuff, what's the process? Just put it in the blender?
In a way, but I want to give a big shout out to our data analytics team. They play a big role in helping us compile all of that data that's provided. They put all of that relevant information I alluded to from the statements into a format that myself and the investment team can then work with.
When that happens, as you're pouring through that data, are things starting to pop up?
Yeah, we start to see some higher level insights of what's going on underneath the hood, but we can see a lot of stuff pop up because we deal with a wide array of unique individuals with different situations and different backgrounds. We can see things like accounts with a laundry list of positions or maybe only a few individual stocks. We can also see things where people might have lots of accounts scattered all over the place or even at different advisors and custodians.
Does a lack of diversification at some point start to emerge?
So yeah, we will see a multitude of different accounts, and we take all that into account when looking at both the individual account level and the overall household level. But with the lack of diversification, we see a lot of different things, but we can see both under diversification and over diversification. For example, we could see a large concentration in a small handful of something like healthcare stocks, or even a big chunk of the portfolio invested in one single company. Now on the flip side, we'll sometimes see over diversification via someone owning several different target date funds and or asset allocation funds. So those products in and of themselves aren't inherently bad because at its core, diversification is a great thing for many individual investors. However, by owning several of those previously mentioned products, you can end up with a lot of overlapping investments and create redundancies within the portfolio.
We're with Trevor Nargis, Supervisor, Trading Team at Annex Wealth Management, talking about the Annex Wealth Management portfolio review. How about risk? Can you see when something's riskier than a client should have?
Yeah, so that comes down to us looking at the overall account, but also individual positions. So we kind of balance all that along the way. We can look at how aggressive are the equities. Are you maybe geared more towards growth names versus value names, things like that. But what's really important to take into account is risk appetite versus risk tolerance, if you will. That's always super important to note.
I'm sure you see portfolios that are loaded up with proprietary investment products. And to be clear, that's an investment that was invented, the XYZ Advisory Company Super Duper Fund, right? You see those things.
Yeah, so there's instances where you could see someone who comes over from another advisor and maybe their whole portfolio consists of that firm's product. So that could be a lot of, that firm's own ETFs and mutual funds. Maybe they're good, maybe they aren't. This could be because the firm might make commissions off of having their clients in a select list of products, which might incentivize who's ever constructing the portfolio to put the client into those products, even though there could be better options elsewhere. It's important to note, Annex, we don't operate that way. We're a fee-only fiduciary, so we aren't tied to one fund company, and we have a broader universe of investments to choose from as a result.
So the investment team, they've done the forensic analysis. We can then get back with the prospective client and with the wealth manager, lay things out in black and white.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The whole goal of the analysis is to slice and dice the portfolio and point out what we see. We can talk through what's good and where there might be room for improvement. Now, if we see areas where improvements can be made, we definitely want to make that known and have a conversation around it to help someone better understand what they might own and why they own it. Our team looks into a wide array of things such as factor exposure, sector, country, fundamental data points, etc., and we want to talk through all that.
Did you know Annex Wealth Management has a charitable foundation? The Annex Charitable Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation operating exclusively for charitable purposes. Since its inception, the Annex Charitable Foundation's primary purpose is to provide financial support to existing charitable difference makers that support the local communities in Wisconsin. Through the years, Annex has supported organizations including the Vince Lombardi Cancer Foundation, Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, Wisconsin 9/11 Memorial, USO Wisconsin, Summer Summerfest, and more. Annex believes insurance is part of a comprehensive financial plan. So if an Annex client purchases insurance from a broker we recommend, all profits from those insurance sales will go directly to the Annex Charitable Foundation. So far in 2023, Annex Charitable Foundation has donated over $130,000 to difference makers. If you'd like to learn more about the Annex Charitable Foundation, visit annexcharitablefoundation.org.
Credit Karma. Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Wednesday, January 24th. Consumer confidence is up. That's good, as consumer spending contributes to 70% of GDP. But what if all the spending comes at a price that includes getting behind on payments? Consumers in the U.S. are increasingly using credit cards for fuel, groceries, hotels, and airlines and concert tickets. I get it. The Taylor Swift factor had a $5 billion economic impact. But after the friendship bracelets are put away, the credit card statements start showing up. It's time to pay the piper. Delinquency rates on credit cards have climbed 3 straight years. Credit card loans up 14%. With interest rates still high and the average credit card rate at 21%, some segments of Americans are slowly being strangled by the cost of debt. Do you think financial literacy should be taught in schools? Seems it should. I'm Dave Spano from Annex Wealth Management, and that's your Know the Difference Minute.
Know the difference with Annex Wealth Management. It's a loss when someone passes, but when they took the time to do things correctly with a well-constructed estate plan, it makes distribution of assets far easier. And if you're on the list for some of those assets, there are right and wrong things to do. And you also need to manage your expectations. Alec Durand is an estate planning attorney at Annex Wealth Management. Got experience in all of this. Hey, Alec.
Hey, Danny.
We're going to cover key aspects of inheriting money, as well as covering the ramifications like taxes, the need to be patient, and the expectation there might be some surprises in store, right?
There can be, especially if you're unprepared.
First thing to determine is what you're inheriting. Is it cash, investments, real estate, or IRAs, 401ks? Why does that matter?
It matters because different assets are treated differently, particularly for tax purposes. For example, retirement accounts like IRAs and 401ks are subject to something called the Secure Act, and other assets, depending on certain circumstances, could be entitled to step up or step down in basis.
One thing you can be sure of, there are tax ramifications to inheriting money. This term, basic adjustment at death, what does that mean?
So a basis adjustment means that the value of an inherited asset is either going to be stepped up or stepped down in value as of the date of death of the person leaving you that asset, depending on the type of asset it is. Particularly things like cash accounts, stocks, and real estate can be adjusted based on whether the person that passed away had that asset appreciate or depreciate in value during the course of their ownership of the property.
Is that the same deal with like an IRA?
No, IRAs are typically not entitled to an adjustment in basis, and as I alluded to earlier, IRAs are subject to the Secure Act. So there's different rules regarding inheriting those assets depending on your relationship to the person that left you the asset. For example, most non-spouse beneficiaries of IRAs are going to be subject to the 10-year rule under the Secure Act, which means that they are going to have 10 years or December 31st on the 10th year after the date of death of the person passing away to completely liquidate their inherited account.
The ramifications of inheriting money. We're talking with Alec Durand, an estate planning attorney at Annex Wealth Management. Next question, when inheriting money, how are you inheriting? There's 3 ways. There's outright, there's jointly, and then there's in a trust. Let's talk about outright.
From a conceptual standpoint, that's probably the most simple way to inherit an asset. And it's when someone just leaves you individually as the inheriting person. So they named you on the payable on death of a bank account or something like that. And what it means is that once you obtain possession of the asset, you own it individually. You can do whatever you want with the asset. It's yours.
How about jointly?
Is somewhat similar, but it just means that you don't have sole ownership of that asset. It's most common in the real estate scenario. So grandma or grandpa passes away and leaves you joint ownership of a rental cabin or a vacation property. So you just need to be cognizant of the fact that you don't wholly own that property. And depending on how well the person laid out their estate plan, there could be certain restrictions on what you can do with your ownership share of that property.
And then there's inheriting money within a trust.
Generally, when you inherit money in a trust, it's an irrevocable trust, meaning that you can't go back and change the terms of that trust. So you need to be aware that there could be restrictions left under the terms of that trust on what you can do with that property, whether you can divest yourself of it and when and if you're going to get control of that property.
We see a lot of this at Annex Wealth Management, the ramifications of inheriting money. We can offer a couple suggestions. The one, and this is just common sense, don't spend it before you get it.
Absolutely. Estate administrations, whether there's a trust involved or whether it's a will-based estate plan or whether there's no estate plan in place, administrations take time. There's going to be wrinkles that pop up in any situation. There's also going to be debts and expenses that have to get paid, as well as any applicable estate taxes. The figure that you see on a balance sheet might not always be the figure that you're going to end up inheriting. So it's important to remember to keep a clear head and make decisions only after you've actually received the inheritance, not before.
And then keep in mind, Uncle Sam's going to come knocking.
Right. If there's any applicable estate taxes, that could take a hit on it. And also, depending on the asset that you inherit, you could actually owe income taxes. The best example is, a traditional IRA or a 401k. Distributions from those assets are ordinary income. So you will have to pay income taxes based on those distributions. And you need to be aware of that when you're inheriting them.
And our final step is be prepared to deal with your inheritance as part of a trust that will be a little bit more controlled.
It can be. Typically, estate taxes are going to be treated the same way, whether you're inheriting something outright or in a trust. The difference becomes of whether the assets are going to accumulate inside the trust or whether they're going to be distributed to you outright. It can affect whether there's going to be income taxes at a trust level or at your personal level. You also need to be aware of any restrictions placed on that trust. If someone else is going to be the trustee, you have to be willing and prepared to work with that trustee in order to get access to your inheritance.
Ramifications of inheriting money. Alec Durand is an estate planning attorney at Annex Wealth Management. Thank you.
Thank you.
Soft landing? Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Thursday, January 25th. Shocking, surprising, and hotter than expected. That's how the fourth quarter GDP numbers were described after landing this morning. It's clear the analyst consensus whiffed on this one. Predictions were in the 2% range, but instead came in at 3.3%. That's off last quarter's 4.9%, but still another sign that the widely predicted recession continues to sit this one out while the American consumer does not. There was also some progress on inflation. Core prices for PCE rose 2.7% annually versus 5.9% just a year ago. PCE is the favorite Fed data point as a longer-term inflation run. As of this morning, the odds of a March cut were just 47%. The runway is in sight, but we're not quite there yet, so keep those seatbelts on. I'm Dave Spano from Annex Wealth Management, and that's your Know the Difference Minute.
Know the difference with Annex Wealth Management? Well, this might be the shortest segment ever done on this show. I'm going to ask Amy Kiskala, an estate planning attorney and a wealth strategist at Annex Wealth Management, the following question. Do houses make for terrible wealth transfer vehicles?
Yes.
There you go. Segment's over. Thank you.
No problem, Danny.
No, we're not going to stop there. We're going to dig in a little deeper. Home may be where the heart is, but after it's inherited, it's where heirs must manage upkeep and deal with family conflicts related to what to do with it. What's a better way? And that's what we're going to explore. Used to be the American dream included not only buying a house, but passing that same house on to children. But what's the unspoken truth, Amy?
It is a bit of an over-exaggeration to say that it's a terrible wealth transfer vehicle, but transferring your home to your children does come with some challenges. You can be passing along financial burdens, red tape, home maintenance responsibilities, potential family conflict, and housing market volatility.
All of the above, right. A study from Money and Family found 68% of homeowners plan to leave a home or property to heirs, yet 56% haven't told them about their plans. That could be a problem.
It could be a problem on a number of fronts. So if the estate plan doesn't specify who inherits the house, then the children might have to decide if they're going to own it together, which can create some conflicts, or if one of the children is going to take it over. Whoever takes over the home will need a plan to pay those ongoing expenses. And these can be hard decisions to make after mom or dad is gone. So having that conversation while mom and dad are alive can be beneficial in determining whether any of the children would want the house and what the plan is to pay those homeowner expenses.
Right, because if your kids are spread out over the country, who's going to wind up with it?
Yeah, oftentimes I think parents assume that the kids want the house when the reality is they may be living all over the country.
Right. The question is, do houses make for terrible wealth transfer vehicles? Amy Kiskela is an estate planning attorney and wealth strategist. She said, yes, kind of. Let's talk about the financial burden.
As many of us are aware, there's a lot of expenses that go with owning a home. You've got home maintenance and improvements, utilities, property taxes, emergency repairs, insurance. Good idea for all the parties to know what those costs are. There can also be additional complications if there's a mortgage on the house. So let's say mom took out a mortgage at 3%. After mom dies, if you're inheriting the house, you're going to have to refinance that mortgage in your own name. And if you're doing that under today's rates, closer to 8%, those mortgage payments can be higher than you anticipated.
And what if the heirs want to sell the home? There's a lot involved with that. And let's say there's a couple of kids and they've got this hot potato now of a house. What I would hate, I guess I'm thinking of my situation, I'd hate for my boys to just unload the thing because they wanted to unload it.
Right. You want to be really thoughtful about that. And there can be a lot of steps to selling a house. So one of the first things you have to determine is, well, how is the house titled? And does somebody even have authority to sell the house? So if there's a probate involved, that might mean the executor, or it could be the successor trustee if your house is owned by a trust. Often a good idea to use a realtor and an estate planning attorney to help guide the family through that process.
So we do this because owners often have a deep emotional attachment to their homes. So when people gift their homes to children and heirs, they're not just given an asset, they're endowing them with all the good memories that were made on the property, but it can open up a can of worms. There are better ways to plan through what to do with a family home. What have you seen work?
I've seen this transition work well when parents do have those conversations and really go through that thought process ahead of time during their lifetimes and have a plan in place. So oftentimes it might make sense, the kids may be spread across the country, but there may be one that's living locally that it does make sense for that child to take over the house. Then you want to make sure your estate plan is written to take that into account. So let's take an example. All right, so you've got two children, mom and dad have a house worth $500,000 and other assets worth $3.5 million. So if there is one kid that wants the house, then the estate plan could say that maybe that child gets the $500,000 house and $1.5 million of other assets. Well, the other child is going to get $2 million of other assets.
I guess it would be a conversation because first you need to talk to the kids, right, and see what they might be interested in. But you need to negotiate with your kids. That's a different question. So it's important to set that up before you talk to the estate planning attorney, but then to put the plan in place and say, okay, guys, here's how it's going to go.
Yeah, the estate planning attorney can walk you through what that process looks like. Sometimes you can set it up ahead of time. Sometimes you may not know. And so maybe your estate plan gives the children the option. Like you may not negotiate with your kids, but maybe they negotiate with each other after your death to decide if one of them maybe wants to take over or buy the house from the other.
There's a reason, Amy, that you're on the team. Amy Kiskela, for stuff like this. She's an estate planning attorney, a wealth strategist at Annex Wealth Management. She and the rest of the bunch can help you. Amy, thanks for the time.
Thank you, Danny.
Turning the ship around? Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Tuesday, July 25th. China had an extended lockdown from COVID. It only started lifting restrictions back in October 2022. The reopening was less than stellar. High hopes hit the rocks of reality, and China's markets have been struggling. China's Politburo, which is the central committee of the Chinese Communist Party, said the government will step up policy support for the economy. Markets popped higher. Can they really turn that gigantic ship around? It may be tough. They're trying to be measured and targeted, branding this as a comprehensive counter-cyclical move. The one good thing about communism is that they can move quickly if they want to. Or rather, they can force others to move quickly when the Politburo says so. It's still going to be choppy waters because socialism, a shrinking population, and strained relations with the West aren't very conducive to growth. Herding cats? Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Wednesday, July 26th. Surprising no one, the Federal Reserve's policy-setting body, the Federal Open Market Committee, hiked its target for the federal funds rate 0.25 percentage points. The decision was so well telegraphed that they probably should have saved their time and effort by just phoning it in instead of actually meeting in person. The one thing that was surprising in the Fed statement was that it said economic growth was moderate. Last time, they said it was modest. In Fed speak, moderate is faster than modest. So it's a bit of a head-scratcher as to what data they're looking at. The big disagreement within the Federal Reserve isn't about today's move, but about whether there's more to come, or if this is good enough. Coming to a unanimous conclusion at the next meeting in September, or maybe at the following one in November, could be like herding cats.
Know the difference with Annex Wealth Management. We're all familiar with Social Security, but what about spousal Social Security? Here to talk about it, two members of our financial planning team. First, Arabella Perrins, a financial planning specialist at Annex. Welcome, Arabella.
Hi, Danny.
And Eric Strom, financial planning manager, CFP.
Hi, Danny.
Let's go over what exactly is a spousal benefit.
Social Security was actually created back in 1935. A few years later, in 1939, new legislation added spousal benefits, which were really designed to protect the non-working spouse and allow them to get some amount of benefit as well.
So how is that benefit determined?
The spousal benefit is a combination of both your spouse's full retirement age benefit, but also the timing of when you start your own benefits. And this adds an extra layer of complication in that there's some timing to this. And so there's some strategy that you can have with both when your partner starts their benefit, but also when you start your own benefit that can impact not only your own benefit, but that spousal benefit that you qualify for. And so these benefits are interacting with each other. So our team goes through many hours of training to know all of these rules inside out to help our clients determine the timing between spouses to optimize all of these benefits and how they interrelate with each other.
So when can somebody begin collecting spousal benefits?
You can start your spousal benefit as early as age 62, but two key things to remember. Number one, you can't start your spousal benefit until your spouse has in turn started their benefit first. And because of that interaction, as Arabella alluded to, it is quite complicated in that manner. Now, another factor, though, number two, is that either taking your own benefit or spousal benefit early, and by early I mean before your full retirement age, leads to a permanent reduction in your spousal benefit and or your own benefit. Because of that, it is very complicated and important to be careful about when to start that. Finally, to get your full spousal benefit, you have to wait until your full retirement age. Now, interestingly, your full retirement age is when your spousal benefit has stopped growing. Everyone thinks, oh, the benefits grow till age 70, not spousal. And that adds another extra wrinkle to this.
True or false? You can get up to 50% of your spouse's full benefit.
That is true. So the spousal benefit only reaches a maximum of 50%. And that is a key word, maximum. So just like Eric mentioned, you cannot delay beyond full retirement age and get over that 50%. So if you start before full retirement age, you do get that permanent reduction below 50%, but it can never go above that 50% amount.
Wow, I can see how this gets complicated. We're talking about spousal Social Security benefits. If somebody's widowed or divorced, can they still claim spousal Social Security benefits?
Yes. So starting off with widows do not receive spousal Social Security benefits, but rather something that we call survivor benefits. So survivor benefits have different rules to spousal benefits. It is a completely different ball game in that you can get as much as 100% of the deceased spouse's benefit. On the other hand, ex-spouses can claim spousal benefits as long as they were married for at least 10 years. And a very common concern that we get from clients is, will my ex know when I've claimed on their benefit? Do I have to reach out and contact my ex? And luckily for everybody, these ex-spousal benefits are isolated from your ex-spouse. So your ex will not know if or when you apply based on their benefit.
If you're remarried, though, you don't get to double dip. You can't claim your ex's benefit.
Right. So you cannot get a ex-spousal benefit if you remarry. The one caveat is if you did remarry and then that marriage ended, then you actually could. In general, if you remarry, no, that's off the table. You can no longer do that.
This sounds kind of complex. Is the application process, what do you have to do to get Social Security spousal benefits?
Before we answer that, let me say one other thing, that we're commonly asked about two former strategies that no longer are available regarding spousal. There used to be something called file and suspend and another strategy called restricted application. We get a lot of client questions still about those, like, hey, can I file for my own benefit, pause it, and then get my spousal benefit and let mine grow? The days of doing those two strategies are over. They were legislated out of existence and they are no longer able to be used. If you do apply, though, Arabella, walk us through what that process looks like.
The most important thing to understand about the application process when it comes to spousal benefits is something we call the deemed filing rule. So when someone files for one benefit, so this is either your own benefit or your spousal benefit, you will actually be deemed to be filing for both benefits at the same time. And the Social Security Administration will look at which of these benefits is higher at the time, and you will receive whatever that higher amount is. You don't have to specially designate that you're applying for the spousal or your own benefit. You're just applying for both at the same time. And when it comes to applying, there's several ways that you can do that. You can apply online, over the phone, or at your local Social Security office.
Arabella Parents, a financial planning specialist at Annex. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Danny.
Eric Strom, financial planning manager, CFP, enrolled agent with the IRS. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Too fast, but not too far? Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Thursday, July 27th. Second quarter gross domestic product rose at a 2.4% annualized pace. It's not spectacular, but it's not too shabby either. There were a few pleasant surprises in the GDP report. Different sectors have been passing the recession baton around, but that may be mostly behind us. Goods spending had its year-long recession in 2022. Investment spending finally emerged from a 4-quarter-long recession. Services spending growth is slowing, but slow growth is different from outright contraction. The roving recession may be over. The Fed has moved from hiking fast and furiously to being a bit wishy-washy about future hikes. A pregnant pause by the Fed could help bring some stability and clarity to the outlook. They may have moved too fast with rate hikes than what many people would have liked, but the upside is that they probably haven't moved too far.
Did you know Annex Wealth Management has a certified divorce financial analyst on our staff? Meet Deanne Phillips, a certified financial planner, certified divorce financial analyst, accredited behavioral financial planner, and Annex's own director of client learning and development. Through Annex Wealth Management, the role of our CDFA is twofold: education around the divorce process and analysis related to financial aspects of divorce, including asset division projections. Have questions about the divorce process and how it impacts financial aspects and asset divisions? Contact us today, annexwealth.com.
Know the difference with Annex Wealth Management? Brandon Lehman, Director of Annex Private Client. Welcome back.
Danny?
Well, let's start there. What's the best way to describe Annex Private Client?
It's a part of Annex that really caters to the high net worth, complex situations that have a lot of moving parts. One way I like to think about it is integrating the tax with the estate, which we do at Annex, right across Annex, but this gets to levels where we're worried about estate taxes, where we're worried about how does this flow generationally, philanthropically, how does this all work together, and that's where Annex Private Client really comes into play.
You are the right person to talk about this. According to Fidelity's Millionaire Outlook study, 82% of millionaires are self-made. Easy to think the wrong way about high net worth individuals and families. Plenty of myths we're going to talk about for some insight. In your role with Annex Private Client, you might have heard some of this frustration firsthand. The first millionaire myth is if you got a high salary, you are set for life.
Yeah, so that is a huge myth on multiple levels. But the first and foremost is what we've noticed, and it's not all people, but people tend to grow into their income. So the key to this, the key to make that millionaire status, right, is savings. What you see from incredibly successful people is this laser focus on savings. They might make a lot, but they sure save a lot. And it's not just 401k. They look at 401k as, yes, it's that tax advantaged opportunity to save, but no, we're doing a lot more saving somewhere else inside of an opportunity to grow so they can reach those early retirement goals.
Millionaire myth number 2, it's all luck. And let me tell you, blood, sweat, tears, right?
It is all about how much they pour into their lives. Let me take a step back. What I mean by that is a lot of these millionaires are actually business owners, and it's blood, sweat, and tears of 10, 20, 30, 40, in some instances, 50 years of pouring their souls into their business and eventually coming out of it with $1 million or more. But it's taken years. It's sleepless nights. It's stress. It's hard. It's travel. All of that is poured into this. So when you see the end game, what you don't see is just like an iceberg, all of that stuff under the water that they had to pour into it to make it successful.
Millionaire myth number 3, you got to make all your money before you retire.
Well, see, that leads to the business owner thing again, because that's so not true. What you tend to see is, yes, they might cash flow really well right before retirement, but really it's after retirement, quote unquote, is all defined and all relative on what you want to do. But when they sell that business, when they finally monetize all that hard work of 20, 30, or 40 years.
Brandon Lehman, director of Annex Private Client, an offering from Annex for clients with high net worth and complex challenges that come along with that. Millionaire myth number 4, you got to have a fancy college degree.
To be fair, a lot of folks do have degrees, but is it fancy? Typically not. Is it high end? Typically not. It's the will and the drive to build a successful business and focus on that and put all your heart and soul into building something successful. That is how they reach these levels. That is how folks have gone from nothing, in some instances, literally nothing, to multi-million dollars because blood, sweat, and tears that they just did year over year over year. Now, yes, college helped, some instances, but some of these folks didn't go to school. I can think about easily a handful of folks that I know that have become incredibly wealthy that didn't end up going to college.
Millionaire myth number 5, they work for big banks, law firms, and tech companies.
Well, I think this ties right back into myth number 4, which is just they tend to be business owners. The vast majority of millionaires, 66% actually, are individual business owners. They started something or purchased something. Think about this in the aspect that it started from scratch. Sometimes they take a huge risk and go out and buy another business that was maybe doing okay, and then they've turned it into something just incredible. And again, a handful of those I've seen just this year where they bought something that was doing well, and over the course of 9, 10, 20 years, turn it into something that was unbelievably successful.
Millionaire myth number 6, success comes easily and early.
I think I've said it all along. It's blood, sweat, and tears. It doesn't come early because you have to put in the work. Yes, maybe there's some luck there that somehow it happened, but in reality, it's hard work day in and day out. It's grinding. It's putting in the effort, and then eventually it pays off. Sometimes it pays off really early if you're lucky, but in reality, it takes a long time to build this. But the hardest thing that you start to see, which I think dives into kind of our last myth, is they don't ever get out of it because they don't know what to do after it.
Myth 7 is they don't have anything to worry about, and really the next one is they got their future all figured out. That's not true.
Yeah, so both of those are definitely not true. When you think about one, they have a lot to worry about because when we talk business owners might support more than just their family. It might support 10, 20, 30, 150 other families. That weighs on their mind all the time. Is the decision they're making right, not just for them, but for everybody else that relies on that company? The second thing is, do they have it all figured out? Absolutely not. That is why they come to us, because they are really good at what they do, incredibly successful. But do they understand how their decisions, their tax choices, their estate choices impact all of that? That's where we come into play when you look at the wealth strategist team we have at Annex Private Client to really factor all that in, laser focused, and help build really what is next. And to make sure that myth number 7 and myth number 8, if they don't have anything to worry about and they got it all figured out, that's our job to help them get through that.
No matter where you're at, there's a logical entry point to work with Annex. There's Annex Ignite, Annex Comprehensive Wealth, Annex Private Client. Website, annexwealth.com. Click that Get Started button. Brandon Lehman, Director of Annex Private Client. Thanks for jumping on.
Danny?
A weak core. Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Thursday, August 10th. July inflation numbers were slightly better than expected. Monthly inflation was a tame 0.2%. Consumer prices have risen 3.2% from a year ago. These numbers are headed in the right direction, though there are likely going to be some speed bumps and potholes along the way. Food prices are rising again due to bad weather and Russia exiting Ukraine's grain shipment agreement. Energy prices are also moving higher with OPEC production cuts and increased driving. How important food and energy are depends on your spending habits. But for the average household, food is 13% of spending and energy is 7%. The most visible 20% of spending is moving higher. However, about 80% of what people spend their money on, which is called the core, is showing weaker inflation. This is a rare case of a weak core being a good thing. Shutdown averted or deferred? Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Tuesday, October 3rd. House Speaker McCarthy surprised some people by getting a bipartisan spending bill through the House. Up to that point, he was trying to cobble together something all Republicans could get behind. The deal keeps the government funded until November 17th. Was this a major breakthrough of bipartisanship? Will the parties come together to address massive fiscal deficits? Probably not. It just buys time so they can keep kicking the proverbial can down the road. One perspective is that by bringing a last-minute bipartisan deal forward, it could force the Republican holdouts to play a bit more nicely to get a mid-November bill done. Time will tell. The government's fiscal house is a mess, and it seems like nobody can agree on where to start the cleanup. Roving shutdowns may be the norm until after the election.
Know the Difference with Annex Wealth Management. Mark Beck, Chief Growth Officer at Annex, is back. Welcome.
Thank you.
We did a segment a couple of years ago based on a call we took on one of our radio shows. The guy was 62, wanted to know when he should start working with an investment and retirement plan. And Mark, if I remember correctly, it opened up a whole conversation about when someone should engage.
You'll often open up a can of worms with a question like that. I always think to myself, when is really about your readiness and willingness to be engaged, really around, am I ready for advice?
Yeah. It was based on age and timing. Let's talk about where they should fit within the structure of Annex Wealth Management, because we are built to meet people wherever they're at on their journey. And as our clients' needs grow, we're growing right alongside them with additional staff resources, all the knowledge required to meet the need. Probably the classic Annex experience is what's called Annex Comprehensive Wealth. Let's talk about that.
It's the development that has happened at Annex along with clients, as you said, as we've all kind of grown and developed and understand, and the refinement of the delivery. So kind of service model is the way to think about this. When you talk about Annex Comprehensive Wealth, you're talking about someone that's achieved a certain level of financial security and gotten to a point where the complexity of planning starts to advance. We're likely closing in on retirement, or at least getting to a spot where we really want a clear path to make sure we're going to get there. We're thinking a little bit more along the advanced strategies that might be available to us to be able to accumulate significant wealth and get to the point where we can maintain our lifestyle into retirement. Really, I want to live every day like it's Saturday, never want to be a financial burden to somebody else, and I want to be able to orderly pass along my assets when that time comes, and all the strategies that go along with that.
That is Annex Comprehensive Wealth. Now, Annex Private Client came about through a long process with a goal to address complex challenges that high net worth individuals and families encounter. It's one of the main reasons we've added wealth strategists, estate planning attorneys, tax specialists, and we built an even stronger investment committee. And it was a natural part of the growth of Annex Wealth Management. And you, as Chief Growth Officer, you're very involved with this.
Absolutely. This is a spot where we can bring together a team of strategists around a family, and we start to deal with issues like philanthropy and multi-generational legacy wealth planning. The complexities around estate and tax really grow. And bringing those things together, they really come together in a way. I'll loop in portfolio strategy there as well, because they're all intertwined when we get to this level. It's really a fantastic opportunity to watch the team come together, and coming together in this area where really complex scenarios are extremely important. But all of it is around that individual or family's primary financial goals. What are they really trying to accomplish, right? Is it lifestyle focused? Is it philanthropy focused? Or is it legacy?
It's a specialized team. Is it necessarily a larger team?
Larger in the way of connectedness, I would say. So in comprehensive wealth, we have financial planning team, tax planning team, estate planning team, of course, the investment management team. Lots of team members there, but your primary engagement is going to be with client service manager and wealth manager. Those are your administrators and your head coach for your team, if you will, and they're going to be guiding what's going on. And when we get to private client, what we're doing at this point is needing to bring together in the room some of those other strategists from those different walks. So the people that are focused on the investment portfolio, because it becomes even more customized in that space. Same thing on the tax and estate side. They're intertwined with one another, and it's about execution of those strategies.
It's important to note that we believe that investment and retirement planning is for everybody. Annex Ignite is designed for people who have simpler needs, but still have a desire to do things correctly on the way to the retirement they deserve. I wish Annex Ignite existed when I was in my 30s. It would have been the right vehicle. I needed strong guidance from someone who understood where I could go. My son and daughter-in-law, married, now with a baby, both have, pretty significant jobs. They need that kind of guidance.
They do, and that's what Annex Ignite is all about. This is directional in nature, right? It's guideposts along the way. It's the guidance that says, if we make a couple of adjustments, you're on this course currently, and here's where you might want to end up when we get there, and what are the action items today to adjust to a course that fits with your long-range expectations. Saving strategy, financial security, making sure that you're handling short-term needs and long-term goals, that those things are blending themselves well together. That's what Annex Ignite is about.
Back to the start of this conversation, we talked about the timing of beginning to work with Annex. Nothing has changed there. We're going to meet you where you're at with our 3 platforms, Annex Ignite, Annex Comprehensive Wealth, and Annex Private Client. What's the best way to start?
The best way to start really is to reach out to us and begin with an initial conversation. Where are you now? What are you looking for? What are the things that are driving you to consider a relationship with a wealth management firm? And then we'll get to understand what the resources are and what your position is so far, and guide you down a path to what we think is going to be the best fit service model for you.
Mark Beck, Chief Growth Officer, Annex Wealth Management. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
Unprecedented and bad? Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Wednesday, October 4th. In an unprecedented move, Representative McCarthy was kicked out of his chair. He earned the chair after an unprecedented 15 rounds of votes. The word unprecedented has been used a lot over the last few years. It's probably been abused as well. Most people use it to instill fear in readers or listeners. It's almost as though it's come to mean this has never happened before, so it will end badly. And that's just wrong. There are lots of things that are unprecedented that end up well. Everything was unprecedented at some point. That's how it became precedent. I've never been older, so my age, for me, is unprecedented. I was never a father before I had my son. The Brewers have never won the World Series, so when they do, it will be unprecedented. Unprecedented doesn't equal bad. I'm Brian Jacobson, Chief Economist at Annex Wealth Management.
Know the difference with Annex Wealth Management? Grandchildren are great, and for many of us, we want to do special things for them. One might be assisting with college. Deanne Phillips is here to talk about it. Hey, Deanne.
Hello, Danny.
This is a fun topic.
It is. Well, you could speak from the voice of experience with a new grandchild, right? And as a wealth manager, I can say I often sit with people who have extended family like grandkids where they value education as a family. They want to do what they can to assist them and give them a good start coming out of school with as little student student loan debt as possible.
Deanne shared a great list of ways that grandparents can help with college. The first and cleanest, I guess, is pay tuition directly to your grandchild's school. What do you think about that one?
Well, if they just want to pay for school for their grandchild outright, first off, they do need to have a communication with parents and the child to see if the parents have directed the kid to have any kind of skin in the game, right? So what the expectations are. But paying outright is certainly the easiest way. It's not a gift if they pay tuition only. Tuition, though, not room and board, directly to the school.
The one we hear about the most is opening up a 529 plan in the grandchild's name.
Right. Now, those plans are so named for the IRS code that allows someone to open an account that has tax-free earnings and withdrawals when the money is used on qualifying higher education expenses. Now, this case, it doesn't mean just tuition, but room and board, supplies, fees. There are some things that are restricted, though, so you have to watch that list. While the annual gift tax exclusion is $17,000 per recipient for 2023, you can actually fund up to 5 times that, or over $85,000 per person. You can double it up if you're married, and elect to treat the contribution as if made over 5 years. So you can start super funding these. Depending on where you live and what plan you open, you might get a state tax credit or deduction for your contributions as well.
Now, you can also contribute to a 529 plan owned by your grandchild's parents.
Yeah,
right?
you don't have to actually go through the rigmarole of opening one up yourself if you don't want to. You can contribute to the parents' one. You still get that state benefit if it's offered and you live in that state. And your gift can grow substantially over time with tax-free earnings and withdrawals when the funds are used to pay for school. However, assets held in a student or parent-owned 529 will be counted as parental assets on the FAFSA. They could reduce financial aid eligibility by a maximum of 5.64% of the account value. And if you contribute to somebody else's 529, you don't have control of the investment since they're held in the parent's name.
Talking about helping grandchildren with college. How about a straight-up loan for college? Is that done?
Well, you can give an interest-free loan of up to $10,000, but loans greater than that are subject to an IRS set minimum interest rate. The rates are usually typically pretty low. One of the advantages of this method is you get to set the terms. So, for example, you could allow the interest to accrue until graduation and then require interest-only payments for a certain set of time while they're getting on their feet. Or eventually you could convert the loan to a gift, but keep in mind, interest on the loan will be taxable to you but not deductible by your grandchild. And if you forgive that loan in your will, for example, your grandchild could end up owing income tax on the debt forgiveness. And of course, there's always the potential that they might not pay you back.
We're hearing that word tax quite a bit in this conversation.
We
If
are.
your grandchildren are older, maybe they're in college now, you could maybe pay off the student loans when they graduate?
Yeah, well, sure, you could. It would be a gift. So any amount you give over $17,000 in this year, for example, would be subject to having to file a gift tax return. Now, 529 funds of up to $10,000 can be used for paying back student loans now through rule changes in the Secure Act.
Deanne Phillips is a wealth manager, a CFP, and Director of Client Learning and Development at Annex Wealth Management. How can grandparents help with college expenses? What's next?
Well, you could set up an education trust, a little bit more old school. They do provide a measure of control. You specify your wishes in a trust agreement, and the trustee is legally obliged to fulfill them. You could restrict your grandchild's access to the funds regardless of their age, but, be aware that legal and accounting fees can be higher, and gifts made this way are irrevocable.
How about our old friends, the UGMA and the UTMA?
The Uniform Transfer to Minors, the UTMA or the Grant Minors UGMA accounts, they're money that's held in a custodial account directly for a specific child's benefit. Now, this means it's technically and legally their money. With this type of account, your grandchild will assume all rights to the funds once they reach their legal age, and there's no guarantee the money will be spent on college if that was the purpose. There's also a potentially heavier tax on income for those accounts. Now, the first $1,250 of a child's unearned income, so interest, dividends, is not taxed. The next $1,250 is taxed at the child's rate, usually lower than the parents'. This happens because the account, again, legally owned by the kids, not the parent. But income over $2,500 falls under those kiddie tax rules, taxed at the parent's rate. Just remember, kids might need to file actually a tax return in one of two cases. If they have earned income through a job, this year in particular over $13,850, or if they have unearned income, again, those dividends and and interest and capital gains of more than $1,250 in an account reported under their Social Security number.
And our final point is one that I've heard of. I don't hear a lot about it, though, the Coverdell Education Savings Account.
They are not the same as 529s. They were actually meant for lower income tax bracket families who don't contribute more than $2,000 per year, but they can be used for elementary and secondary school expenses. There is an income threshold for contributing to these, up to $220,000 for married couples filing jointly, and there's no threshold for contributing to 529s. But unlike 529s, these are not revocable. The account is like kind of an UGMA or UTMA. They're established, they have a custodian, they're for the child. When the child becomes of age, the money legally becomes theirs, and you can't leave it in this kind of account in a Coverdell for perpetuity. They're forced out and distributed to the child at the child's age of 30 at the latest.
You know, our final suggestion is to work with Annex to help shape your legacy.
Right.
Legacy that might include assisting college expenses for your grandchild. It's part of a comprehensive financial plan, and as Deanne described, it's got a few things you need to watch out for, but we can help. Deanne Phillips, Annex Wealth Management, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Debt fatigue? Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Thursday, October 5th. The U.S. government has issued $33 trillion in debt. Who owns all of it, and who will own it all? About 20% is owned by the government itself through programs like Social Security. It's actually 1/3 if you include the Federal Reserve's holdings in that number. That leaves about $20 trillion to account for. Foreign governments and investors own $7.6 trillion. You wouldn't know it from many media reports, but that number has been growing a lot since 2000. More than $12 trillion is domestically owned by households, banks, insurance companies, and investment funds. Who will own the debt in the future? It may have to be more domestically owned, but with the recent increase in yields, the debt becomes more attractive. I rarely worry about who will buy it. It's more a question of at what price or yield. I'm Brian Jacobson, Chief Economist at Annex Wealth Management. That is your Know the Difference Minute. Come back, kid. Welcome to the Know the Difference Minute for Wednesday, October 18th. China's economic statistics are always suspect. They tend to get the numbers out really fast for such a big country. They also tend to be suspiciously close to targets set by the government. Still, the data for third quarter and for September may indicate that their grasping at straws approach to stimulus is finally getting some traction. In the third quarter, their gross domestic product grew at a 5.3% annualized pace. Consumption was a big driver of growth, while the property sector is still struggling. That could be welcome news for investors, as main Chinese equities that U.S. investors can easily access are down nearly 9% year to date and nearly 17% over the last 3 years. Chinese consumers may finally be making a comeback. Industrial production also may be finding a footing. Those are big maybes, but markets move on maybes. I'm Brian Jacobson, Chief Economist at Annex Wealth Management. That is your Know the Difference Minute.
Know the difference with Annex Wealth Management?
Tom Parks,
we
Director
took a call
of Retirement
recently on a
Plan
radio
Services
show, and the caller was a couple of years away from retirement. And he asked an interesting question. Basically, was, so when should I get in and talk with you guys? If I remember correctly, he was like 62, something like that, right, Mark Beck?
Yeah, that was a good call, and I remember my answer there was you should be starting to build this relationship as soon as you're ready. And what do I mean by ready? When you're ready for advice, and I think that's important. So wherever you are, when you get to that spot where you're thinking about, should I be getting some advice? That is the spot to be starting.
Mark Beck is Managing Director of Wealth Management Services, Annex Wealth Management. When I heard that, I thought about where he was on the path and how we'd have a different planning process with him than, say, somebody in their 30s or 40s, or maybe somebody in their 70s. And that is custom and comprehensive wealth management and planning, right?
It certainly is. Other people would answer that you should start as early as possible. And I think the problem with that answer is some people aren't ready. So when you're younger, maybe you're not thinking about
to your
big
question is,
picture.
how does
You
Roth
should be
work?
starting to
It is
save, but
essentially
maybe you're
the
not ready for
treatment
advice.
of
So
the
across that
contributions in terms
spectrum,
of
though,
taxes.
planning can
Traditional
look different.
pre-tax 401k,
At Annex Wealth
if you don't pay any
Management,
taxes
we'll
on it
meet you
now,
where you're at,
grows
and it's
tax
different for
deferred.
everybody.
Come retirement
Mark,
time,
let's
you
say
take it
somebody
out, you pay
engages
taxes
Annex
on it
Wealth
then.
Management in their
Roth is just the
30s or
opposite.
40s.
You do
What is
pay
our
the
process
taxes
with
now.
them?
Then the
So
money goes
30s
in,
and
grows tax
40s,
deferred
what
to
we're looking
retirement,
for here
at
is
which
starting
point,
to
assuming
establish
you've
habits and
completed all the other
targets.
rules, I'm not
So
gonna
it's
get
a little
into
bit
today,
harder to talk to
but
somebody
at
that's
that point, you
40
don't
years
have to
old
pay
and say,
taxes.
okay,
So it's
pin
either
down
it's pay
exactly
now
when you're going to
instead of pay
retire and
later.
exactly what you
When
need
do
for
you wanna
living
bite the bullet?
expenses.
Correct.
Because they're
Right.
thinking
Roth
all of these
accounts
things are
might
going to
not be
change
the
so
best
much
choice for
between now and
everybody,
maybe when
and
I'm 65
deciding
years
how
old.
much of your
But
money
what we
should go
can
into
do
the
is
Roth
back
versus
into that and say,
traditional,
here's what you're on
it's
track for right
calculations,
now.
current
And if you want the
spending,
target to
future
look a little
taxable
bit
income, life
different,
expectancy,
then we need
and
to make
other
some
factors,
adjustments. So
some of which are,
effective
quote,
use of
unknowable.
resources, establish
Unknowable.
great
That
savings
sounds
habits,
complicated.
A
make
lot
sure
of
that
them are
we're
unknowable,
investing
Danny. And
well,
so when you
make
say
sure
that,
that you
some
know
of the
what
things
you're
are
on
unknowable,
track
let's
to
start with
accomplish
what is
over
knowable.
time
So what we do
and
know
think
is what we're
about
paying
big
in
picture
taxes
goals.
today.
That's kind of
And
where you
what we
want to
don't
be in
know
your
is all
30s
the
and
other
40s.
stuff that you're talking
Okay,
about. So
next
I
step,
think
somebody's
there
in
are
their
a couple of
50s.
groups.
They've
There are
been
people
working
for
longer,
whom
their kids
Roth
might be in
is just
college,
obviously
retirement
the right
is
answer. And then there are
looming in
people
the
for whom
distance, but
Roth
not
is
so far
obviously
away.
not the right
You know,
answer.
50s is
And
where
then
we
it's
start
that
to
middle
think
in
about
between
what's
group that
next.
we gotta help
What are the
figure
things
out
I've
all
been
these
missing, or
little
what can I
details that we're talking
do
about here.
that's
And that's why
beyond
we meet with
the
people
basics I
one-on-one to
have
kind of
been
go through and
accomplishing?
ask
So we
a lot
might
of
have a little bit
questions and
more
help them figure it
income.
out.
We might be
Roth
moving beyond
401ks
just
create
max funding
opportunities for
401ks,
some
for
to
example, and
reduce
start to
lifetime
build
tax bills
some
and leave
additional
more money
investment
for
savings
retirement
elsewhere.
or heirs.
You're probably
Not a bad
executing
thing.
on college
It's a great
strategies
thing.
at this
And it's
point
just,
and
again,
getting
a question
people
of
kind of through
how you're
that and
structuring
making
that
sure
in the context
that the
of your overall
family
plan.
is, you know,
Okay, let's get back to
successful
this.
and
Not
financially
everybody should
secure
contribute to a Roth concept.
and those
How
kinds of
come?
things. And so now
Well,
those
there
targets
are
are becoming a little bit
people
more
for whom the
tangible.
tax
But again, we're building a little more
liability
sophistication into how
is
we're
gonna
building the
outweigh
nest
the
egg.
future tax
Then let's get to that
liability.
caller
And
who
the
was
other
just a
thing
couple
is
of years away from
compound
retirement.
growth
Somebody
over
comes
time.
to us
The
at that
closer you
point
are
in
to
their
retirement,
life.
the
How is it
less
different, or what are we
value that
working on with them?
compound tax-free
It starts to
growth
feel like
has.
it's all
So
coming together
it's
at
just a
this
question
point.
of
So
how
now
close to
we're
retirement
building sort of the
are you starting with
transition
the
plan.
account? Are you
Okay, so I'm a couple
already
years
have an
from
account that continues
retirement.
to grow? All
Where's
those
my
things,
income
and
going
that's
to
why
come
people,
from?
you know,
What
sometimes
do I
they're
need to do to
dissatisfied that I can't just give
prepare?
a
What are
quick
some of the
answer, but we
decision-making
do need
points
to
I'm going
understand
to
all the
need to
variables
hit
to help
on how
figure
do
it
I
out.
get
But there are
ready for
definitely
those
cases
kinds
where
of things?
it's just the
Are
timing
there
or the
different
amounts just don't
sequences
make
of
it make
events
sense.
that I
Well,
can
and
put
this is what a
together that are
financial plan
going
does,
to
and this is why
benefit
we
me,
have
that are going to
teams
help
that can
move the
help
needle
with this.
in
You
my
know,
favor?
broken down
And that's
world
everything
like me,
from
I gotta ask
which
those
accounts
kinds
I'm
of
going to count
questions.
on
We all do,
first,
Dan.
to the tax
Tom
planning
Parks is Director of
ramifications of
Retirement Plan
that, to
Services with
preparing
Annex
for
Wealth
health
Management.
insurance and where it
He and
comes
his team
from,
work with
and
companies
of course to
help build
preparing for
and
things like
maintain
making good
solid
Social
retirement
Security
plans.
decisions.
And these are plans
Mark
that
Beck is
attract and
Managing
retain
Director,
great
Wealth Management
employees.
Services at
Roth
Annex
or
Wealth
traditional
Management. We
401k,
meet our
how
clients
does
where
one
they're
decide?
at. And I know we
Basically, you
work with
take a
new
look and you
clients
try to
who
get
are
a feel
already
for
retired.
what do you think
What
is
happens
gonna
when that
happen
happens?
in
And
the
there's
future
maybe an
based on what
existing
you know
plan from
today.
somewhere
Some
else,
of
or
this is
maybe
just
because of
personal,
poor
Danny.
service
I
or
like
lack of
knowing.
connection.
So
They
I know
come
what
to
my
us,
tax
maybe
rate
not a
is
plan
today.
at all.
I love Roth.
You know,
because I'm
oftentimes
paying
not
it
a plan
and
at
I've done
all.
it.
We
I
do
don't
see
need to think
that.
about it again.
You know, has
Now, is
happened
that a
occasionally
really
where
great
someone has been
financial
getting some
plan from
financial
a
planning
calculator and
advice. They're looking
spreadsheet
for
perspective?
something
Maybe
a little
it's
bit
not,
deeper
but
or more
personality
engaging
factors
than
into this.
sort
I
of
do
the
think you need to
superficial
figure out
level that
some of the
maybe
math.
they've have been experiencing. It's easy for us when you've got your current financial plan because all the data, the inputs basically are right there. So that's sort of the raw materials we can take that and really start to work with it. But moving the needle in terms of doing the math in this type of situation, you're already retired, how are you really thinking about planning ahead for the tax ramifications of required distributions, the charitable aspect of things like qualified charitable distributions, all of that really becomes so important in that phase.
And if you're already retired, folks, don't think it's too late at all. We want to see that.
Oh, absolutely. Even in those retirement years, there are so many really cool things that we help people with that are impactful. And that's beyond just, by the way, managing the investment portfolio. A big part of what we do, steer, manage, and help people towards best outcome, which means help manage your kind of psychology of investing. How do we do that? Build the framework around it well in advance of market volatility. So protect liquidity, for example. Where does the short-term money come from? Build the income buckets. Make sure you stay focused on the growth where the growth needs to be. And therefore, no anxiety around market volatility.
My dad came to Annex in his 80s. He had moved back to be near my sister and I felt it was important to have a fiduciary working on his stuff. That isn't uncommon either.
No, it's not. And actually, that one I would say is becoming more and more common. Oftentimes, by the way, this is clients that are in those retirement years and now they're bringing their parents and they're saying, hey, can you help? This is a really satisfying area for me in particular to work. A couple of reasons. Number one, because they're working with a fiduciary, we can really help them kind of stay out of harm's way. This is where there is the possibility of making really bad mistakes or being taken advantage of. You don't want that to happen. And number two, the peace of mind that comes with somebody helping them consolidate, clean up, organized, know what's going on, know where things are headed, and therefore being prepared for the transitions that are going to come at some point in our lives.
We want to meet you where you're at for investment, retirement planning, tax planning, and estate planning. We do it as a fee-only fiduciary. Know the difference? Website, annexwealth.com. Click that Get Started button and start the Wealth Metric process. Mark Beck, Managing Director, Wealth Management Services. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.